Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today is time for Friday Reads. Welcome to the channel if you are recently joined. I did see some new people came in over the past week, so I'm glad that you're here. And if you are just passing through, please consider liking and subscribing. So last week I did not do a Friday Reads because I was out of town, but I did do the family reading report that we did from Lake Tawakoni, and that was a lot of fun. But so now I'm back with sort of a double-sized Friday Reads about the books that I've been reading over the past couple weeks. Before we get into the books, let's talk for a second about the TV shows. So we finished watching Catastrophe, and we really did enjoy that show. I think it had 4 seasons, and it was just really funny. It also got pretty sad, especially I think it was season 3. It's very real, like realistic, brutally honest at times, but that just made it funnier. I feel like Rob and Sharon were a great couple, not in the sense that they're wonderful people or nice and kind all the time and things like that, but they just, like, I don't know, they just worked together. Their chemistry was really good, and we enjoyed it. Then we started watching The Bear season 2. Now, I have talked about The Bear before. If you have not watched The Bear, you need to, well, first you need to finish watching this video. Then you need to go call in sick, cancel your plans, and watch season 1 of The Bear so that you can watch season 2 of The Bear. I love The Bear. So we are, I don't know, maybe halfway through. I think there's 10 episodes. So we are enjoying season 2 of The Bear. And I don't know what's going to happen after that. We'll see. So let's move on to the books, because I have a big old stack since I am doing 2 weeks worth. First thing that happened, I finished reading Trust. This was for the BookTube prize judging, so I can't talk about it at this time, but I have thoughts. And that's all. I shouldn't say a single thing right now, but I will be making a video about my 6 books in this round that I'm judging. That'll be about around August 1st, and I can't wait to share my thoughts. So that's all I'm gonna say for now. Here's a book I can talk about. I read Nevada by Imogen, Binnie, and this book, I don't know where I got this from. I ordered it, maybe it was eBay. But I really did enjoy this book, and this particular edition has a new afterword by Binnie. So this was the 2022 edition, but the book came out in 2013. So it's 10 years old, and it's sort of become a classic. I don't know if you can call something 10 years old a classic, but it's kind of a classic of trans fiction. And this is about a woman named Maria, who is a trans woman, and she transitioned at the start of the story. I think she says it's been like 6 years. She lives in New York City. She works at a bookstore that is quite obviously the Strand, even though it is not specifically named in the story. And it sort of, this de-glamorizes the idea of working in a bookstore. You know, there's so many books where bookstores are just this cute little quaint store full of eccentric lovables, and the store in this book is not like that at all. This is more like working at Walmart, which does come into the story later on. She's kind of at a dead end in this job and in her relationship with her girlfriend, and a lot of things sort of come to a head at once, and I don't want to give away some of the stuff that happens, but she ends up embarking on a road trip in a car, in her girlfriend's car that she borrowed, and with a bag of stolen drugs. No, wait, she didn't steal them, she bought them. But anyway, a lot of impulsive things happen, and then she's out on the road. And then along the way, she meets James. She stops at a Walmart in this tiny little place off the highway in Nevada. I think it's a couple hours from Reno. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's a town that basically exists because of the Walmart, and almost everybody who lives in this town works at Walmart. And that's where she spots James, and as soon as she sees him, she thinks that he is trans, that he's a pre-transition trans woman. That's just she has like a transdar that goes off when she sees him. And then we kind of switch over to James, and James is indeed grappling with gender issues, but he's not sure. He's just not sure. He's thinking a lot of different things, and really, he's 19 or 20, and he's trying to figure stuff out. He's very young, and one of James's major problems about figuring stuff out is the immense amount of pot that he is smoking at all times, 24/7. I mean, I think I got a contact high just from reading James' part of this story, because he smokes so much pot. And I mean, I can understand he's trying to. If I lived in the middle of nowhere in the desert and worked at Walmart, I might smoke a lot of pot too, really. And he's also just trying to blur the edges of uncomfortable things that he's sort of thinking about or trying not to think about and not really figuring out. Every time he kind of skirts up to the edges of his gender questions, he just kind of beats around it and he's not really ready to fully embrace it. And he's kind of bogged down at the immensity of all the hurdles that he imagines that would entail in his life, with his job and his family and his girlfriend. And he doesn't live in a place where this would be very accessible to any kind of resources. So he never really thinks all the way through. He just starts coming up with alternative ideas of what his identity might be. And so we have these two people. Maria's about 10 years older than James, and when the two collide, some really interesting encounters and conversations ensue. So I really enjoyed Maria's voice in this story. She's just kind of a mess, but she's a likable mess, and she too is indulging in a lot of drink and pot and things, and the things she's trying to avoid aren't really about her own identity, but more about these crossroads in life as she's leaving her 20s, and she's realizing that her youthful, live by the seat of your pants kind of lifestyle is kind of wearing thin. Her girlfriend has moved up in her job and is becoming more professional. Her voice in this novel is kind of like if Holden Caulfield was a 29-year-old trans woman in 2012. Just a lot of times where you're frustrated about her choices, where she has a jag of some really insightful and interesting things that she's talking about and thinking about, and then she just does some totally boneheaded thing. So I really enjoyed this book. I learned a lot from hearing about her point of view, and also the afterword that I got in my edition was also really interesting, because Imogen, Binnie's voice, was definitely a lot like if Maria was 10 more years older and more less stoned and more composed and kind of had it together. So but still funny and speaking in a way that just sort of branches out with lots of interesting digressions. So that was interesting as well. And she talks in that afterward about, well, I don't want to give it away, because it kind of clarifies something about the story and about the way that it ends. And a lot of people had questions or issues with the way the book ends, but she sort of addresses that in the afterward. So if you can get a hold of this edition, I think you would enjoy reading that part afterward. So anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. It was fun. It was touching. I was left wondering, well, what happened next? Was Maria okay? Was James okay? Did he transition? What happened? So we'll never know, but I really enjoyed reading Imogen. No, it's Nevada by Imogen Binnie. And that is when I went on my own little road trip last week. The books that I brought with me on that road trip are my next two books to talk about. I read A Month in the Country by J.L.Carr. This is one of those short, fabulous books. This book is only 130, no, part of that was the afterword, I think. 135 pages, and every now and then somebody does a video about short novels, or when Shorty September comes around, some people approach short novels and novellas that month. I do a thing on short fiction, but this is a wonderful contender for any time you want a shorter book, a quieter book, it's not action packed, it's not thrills and chills, it's quiet, it's thoughtful, it has some funny parts, it's also very sad in parts. This is the story of Tom Birkin. He is a very young World War II veteran. He's in his early 20s. And you have to stop and imagine right there that somebody who's 23, 24 has already been married, gone off to war, seen and experienced just indescribable horrors, and come back, and they're still at the age when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with yourself, what kind of work you want to do, what kind of man that you want to be. So that's where Tom is at the beginning of the story. He has war trauma. He's experiencing some stuttering and a facial tic when he gets socially nervous, some night terrors. But his plan, he wants to be an art restorer, and his plan is to take this job that will last through the summer in this small, picturesque little village in the English countryside, and he's going to be restoring a medieval mural that's been covered up by layers of paint in an old church. He, besides dealing with his wartime trauma, he also is dealing with the fact that his wife has run off with another man. And so what he thinks is going to happen is that he's going to go take this job, and he's just going to have some peace and quiet. He's going to be in this church, in a bell tower, up on a scaffold, and he won't really have to interact with other people, and he will just be restored by the peace and quiet and the focus of the job, and then maybe he'll do a good job, and this will lead to other jobs. And this is a case of what you think you want and what you actually need are two different things. And Tom gets not what he wants, but he gets what he needs. I think there was a song about that. But so he gets this job, and I don't want to give too much away because it's so short, but he does have to interact with the townspeople, and he meets some absolutely wonderful people that are also there in the town. There's Moon, who's an archaeologist who is basically, Tom's trying to drag the job out longer than it takes, and so is Moon. He's been hired to do one archaeological little job that he could do really fast, but he's pretending that is a long job because he has his own personal archaeological project. So he's there. Some other people in the town. There's I want to tell you things, but I'm not going to tell you. But let's just say everyone is curious about Tom. People visit him at the church. People start reaching out, inviting him to dinner, inviting him to different things. And slowly the interaction starts to work some magic on him. And it works some magic for us too as readers. And it's just a really exquisite little short novel, and I loved it. Then, unfortunately, hold on. Unfortunately, the last book was less dazzling, and that was Scary Monsters by Michelle de Kretser. Now, I had high hopes for this because this was the one that I selected based on the recommendation of Emily St. John Mandel, who has never disappointed me. But Michelle de Kretser, well, let me just say, it's not a bad book. It's not crappy, but it wasn't what I expected. So this book has two parts, and the way it's arranged, it says it's a novel in two parts. And the two parts are Lyle and Lily. And so the book goes, and then you have to go this way, and then the book goes the other way. But the two parts have virtually no connection. It's two novellas. It's not a novel in two parts, in my opinion, although she says it is. So based on that proclamation, it doesn't work. So what I did, I decided to read the Lily part first. So Lily is set in the 80s, and that is about a young woman named Lily. She's Australian. Her family immigrated to Australia, but she is now working in France. She has a job teaching English in a small town in France. And it is just, there's no plot in this part of the story. It's just sort of an atmosphere. There's Lily and her friends, which are an international bunch. There's some British, German, French, different people assembled. I think somebody's Russian. Anyway, there's just she and her friends. She lives in a crappy apartment with a bad landlord. There's a creepy dude upstairs. She encounters or witnesses different types of racism and xenophobia and misogyny and pervy dudes. And it's just kind of a slice of life. Like, she's in the 80s and this is what's going on for a while, and then it stops. There's not any particular plot or character arc of any kind. It's just sort of a scene, a long scene. But really, there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, I kept flipping forward to see how much longer there was of it because nothing was happening. So it was kind of a dud, but you know, it wasn't awful, but there just really wasn't much there. That's all I can say. I did have some nice 80s musical references. Of course, Scary Monsters is a song by David Bowie, and they talk about a few different songs, and they talk more than once about Total Eclipse by Klaus, Nomi. And so to save this section of the story, I'm going to include a video of that performance. I love how this video starts at his shoes and then goes up, but take a look, especially if you've never heard, or you can't just hear the song, you kind of have to see the performance as well, because it's part of the joy. So then we flip over to the other side, and the other story is called Lyle, and this one is set in the near future. This is where I got the idea that this whole book was a dystopian piece of fiction, because this part kind of is. The other part, not at all. I kept waiting for something weird to happen, and it's just these people in a town. But the other part is a dystopian fiction. It takes place in Australia. Lyle and his family, again, of a not specified Asian descent. And the setting is that there's an extremely dictatorial, authoritarian, racist government in Australia. It is illegal to be Muslim. It is anything that you say or do that goes against Australian nationalism could get you in deep trouble, maybe imprisoned, or maybe repatriated if you're from another country, even if you have been there for generations. And even if anyone in your family does anything askance, your whole family will be deported. And so Lyle and his family walk a very thin line of trying to be very assimilated, never draw attention to themselves. But they have adult children that, like adult children will do, have decided to rebel. And one kid is like an environmental activist. They've got a cousin who runs afoul of the tax laws. There's always a threat. And really the weirdest thing in this story is that there's a law that you can legally do away with your elderly relatives once they become kind of inconvenient. And so that's a major part of the plot. So this part was way more interesting. There was actually a storyline. I enjoyed it. It was not one of the best examples of dystopian fiction I've ever read. It was not subtle. I've read so many that now I kind of need something that says something different or approaches it in a different way. And these were all themes that I've heard before. So I liked it better. If I had read that first, I probably would have been more excited. And then I would have gotten to the second part and gone, oh. So at least it went uphill as far as a reading experience. But overall, it was just okay. So it wasn't that exciting. I spent long enough talking about it though, didn't I? Just to conclude that I'm not really going to recommend it. So that brings us to what I am currently reading. And I'm reading two things right now, and both of them are much more rewarding thus far than that book I just talked about. So I am reading Lone Women by Victor Lavalle. I've been wanting to read something by this author for a while and never got around to it. But I was at the library and I saw this in the new releases. And right now I wanted a more fast-paced, fun kind of book to read before I tackle some of my planned July books. And so this is a horror novel, and it's also historical fiction. And it merges those two things very well. So we have Adelaide, who it's in 1915. Adelaide is a 31-year-old black woman who has always lived with her family in this small farming community in Southern California. It's a black community, but her family's always been kind of set apart. They don't mix and mingle with the people in the town. They kind of stay out on their farm. And a large part of the reason for that has to do with something that is in a trunk. At the opening of the book, I don't want to give too much away, but it opens with a lot of drama. Adelaide is leaving town very fast. She does something and then she leaves town fast. And she's got this big, really heavy trunk with a big brass lock, and she's very concerned in her travels that trunk stay intact. Adelaide buys a plot of land in Montana. She takes advantage of a law that existed that allowed people to buy a plot at a low cost. Basically, they're leasing a plot, and if they meet certain criteria of homesteading it and farming it within 3 years, they get to keep it. And the way it was worded was loose enough that women were able to take advantage of this offer, and people of color. So she buys this plot in Montana and travels there wanting to start over. And she's discovering that her family's tendency to survive by staying apart is not going to work out here in the wild west of Montana, and that she is going to need some help from actual other human beings. So right now I'm a little more than half. So it's a good book. It's a horror book. There's something horrible, and sometimes it's violent and bloody. It's suspenseful. It's about community. There's some other characters that are coming into it that are interesting, and I will have more to say about it when I get to the end. But it is holding up well, and it has been exciting to read so far. And the last thing is along with Lone Women. Now here's a weird pairing. On the side, I'm reading King Lear. So I'm just reading a few scenes or a page or two at a time in between, so that I can really linger on the language and not if I get too caught up in the plot, then I skip over some passages that I want to look at more closely. So I'm kind of enjoying rereading King Lear along with Lone Women, and I'll probably still be reading King Lear when I get to the end of this. If I finish this book today, The Lone Women, it'll be the last book of June, or it'll end up being the first book of July. We'll see how my day unfolds, but King Lear will actually end up being technically a July book. So we've run out of time in June, and I did read, I think I read like maybe 11 or 12 books. I think I looked back, and 7 of the books were books that I did identify in my June TBR, and then the rest were renegades, things that I decided to read along the way. But it was a good reading month. Some of those books in that gigantic June TBR, I haven't ruled them out forever. They weren't the ones that called out to me from the pile during the month. So some of them, they're still in my list. I've returned them to the library, but I might go back and get them at some other time. But it was a good reading month. And I'm going to do a July TBR video this weekend. It's going to be an extra video because I also have a tag video I want to do on Tuesday. But here comes July, so you will be stuck with even more of me than usual this week. So let me know if you read any of these books that I talked about today, and what were your thoughts about them, or anything else you read by these authors that I should pursue, like J.L.Carr and Victor Lavalle. Whatever you have to tell me. What have you been reading this week that was really great, or any TV show recommendations for when we run out of the bear and fall into despair once again. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.